Hey guys, so I've had the Grandmother for a few weeks now, so I wanted to make a review video where I just share my thoughts and honest opinions about the synth. And this is not going to be a list of features or a musical demo. In fact, I'm not even going to play the synth in this video. So if you want to hear what it sounds like, or if you want a list of specs and kind of tutorials, I'll make separate videos for that. I've already made a couple, so check those out on my channel. I'll put links in the description. All right, so the way I'm going to break this review down is I'm first going to cover all the objective, kind of cold technical stuff about it. And then I'm going to talk about more of the subjective and just my personal thoughts and opinions. All right, first, build quality. So it's obviously made of plastic, this really heavy plastic, and there's probably chunks of metal in there as well because the thing is super heavy, much heavier than I thought it would be given its size. It feels super sturdy, so I was kind of skeptical. I thought it was going to feel a little cheap and plasticky because when I saw the color scheme and the plastic sides, I was a little worried, but when I first took it out of the box, it really kind of has this heft to it. It reminds me a lot of the Little Fatty, that kind of, it's like pseudo-plastic, but it's still this super chunky, heavy. Next, let's talk about interfacing. So this synth is super capable in a modern studio. It's got the standard USB MIDI as you would expect. Plus, it's got a ton of different CV jacks, all 1/8 inch, so you can interface with your Eurorack pretty seamlessly. Next, let's talk about the general sound design and synthesis features. So again, you have everything you would expect from a standard subtractive synth. Your 2 oscillators, the classic Moog filter, a spring reverb, all the basic stuff, LFO, ADSR. It's a perfect blend, in my opinion, of just the right amount of tools without going overboard. Obviously, you could add extra things like a third oscillator, a ring modulator, a second filter, etc., etc. But then you're getting into kind of Voyager high-performance synthesizers. So this synth has really kind of this middle ground where it's fun and playable, but at the same time flexible enough for you to be able to do most patches that you can think of. I've rarely found myself missing a module when I was playing with it because there's always kind of quirky workarounds to achieve a specific sound. And the fact that it's semi-modular means you can always expand it with other things. Next, let's talk about the general layout of the modules here. I think they're really well thought out, especially the utilities module, which they placed in the middle, which has a mult and an attenuator. And it's a perfect position because it allows you to kind of bridge things from both sides of the board here. Again, the audio signal path goes logically from left to right. So you have your oscillator, filter, VCA, and you have your ARP sequencer stuff here, perfectly laid out with the buttons here, which help control it. So yeah, I find myself when I'm making patches, I never have to think twice about where they placed something. I always naturally kind of have an intuition for where it would be, which in my opinion is a sign that the synth is really well designed because the interface kind of blurs itself so you can focus on making the sound rather than thinking about how to use the synth. And they've included a few different patch cables of different sizes, and I find they work really well. You have this kind of medium-sized one, this tiny one, and a slightly longer one. And there's a few of those. And again, I've only had to reach for my other patch cables a handful of times when I had to really reach from one side of the synth to the other. But given that the utilities module is in the middle, this allows you to really kind of bridge things over with these smaller cables. All right, next let's talk about the look of the synthesizer, which is this very controversial thing in the forums. A lot of people either hate it or love it. I personally love it, but this is just a subjective thing. I like this color scheme and the general design of it. I like that it's different primarily from other synths. And it kind of, it has this bold statement about it that is like, I don't give a bleep about what you think. Here I am. I'm the grandmother. All right, next let's talk about the sound, which is arguably the most important part of a synthesizer. And this thing definitely sounds like a classic Moog. So if you're familiar with that, it's largely to do with the filter that we all know and love. It generally has more of a modern vibe, in my opinion, so more closer to the Voyager Little Fatty side of things rather than the Prodigy Model D Micro Moog kind of synths, which isn't good or bad or better or worse. It's just a little bit different. But it definitely has this vintagey character to it. So when I play it, it reminds me a lot of when I play kind of vintage monosynths. And that's sort of a wishy-washy way to describe sounds because there's no kind of objective fact of being able to describe that. But describing sound in general is really hard. So you really have to kind of try it out for yourself and maybe listen to some of the demos I made, and hopefully that'll translate some of the character over. Sounds fantastic. The oscillators are super low end and fat and all the kind of general words people throw at sounds. The filter sounds amazing, as you would expect. The spring reverb I was a little worried about because the spring reverbs I've heard on other gear, it's sort of hit and miss. Sometimes it kind of overwashes the sound. This spring reverb is definitely not something you would use on every single patch, but the patches you do use it on, it really adds this lovely character to it. So the envelope sounds great as well. I'm not one of those people who analyzes envelopes to test their snappiness and kind of the micro timing of the attack knob and all that. I generally just gauge it by the kinds of sounds I like to make. If I can make them without fighting with the synths, then in my opinion, it's a good envelope. And in this case, that is definitely true. And that's true of all the modules. In fact, here, there's not one case where I was programming a patch where I thought, oh, I wish this went a little further, or I wish this was snappier, or I wish the filter opened more. I was able to kind of naturally express my patches without being hindered by the synthesizer. All right, so that wraps up the fact-based, kind of cold technical part of the review. So now let's get into more of the just me sharing my feelings and thoughts and the subjective nature. So this part of the review might not necessarily sway you either way. It's just my personal opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. So the way I generally think about synths, or synths that inspire me, are a combination of 4 different factors. You have the sound, the feel, the look, and then the general vibe. So let's quickly go over that. So the sound is not about analyzing frequency responses or looking at waveforms on a chart. It's more the pure sound that you subjectively perceive as you play it. Then you have the feel, which is the feeling of the keyboard and the sliders and knobs and the general kind of one-to-oneness you get with the synth as you're playing it. And then you have the look of it, which is just visually what it looks like and generally how you connect with it. And then finally you have vibe, which is kind of hard to describe, but it's just the general overall vibe you get from the synth. Again, this section is going to be very subjective and kind of wishy-washy, so bear with me here. All right, with that in mind, the Grandmother here definitely hits all 4 of those points, in my opinion. And honestly, I haven't been this excited about a synthesizer in a long time, at least not from a new synthesizer. So I'm super excited that Moog decided to take this risk in a way in unleashing this synth that is kind of unapologetically unique. I mean, even down to its name, Grandmother, which is super weird and fun. And then the color scheme and the sounds, just everything kind of oozes this playful character. But it's like deceptively playful, right? Because once you start to play it, you realize it's a really powerful synth. So it's almost got this like friendly vibe that could even attract like children to have fun on it. But it's got enough power there to make grown-ups envious too. I don't know what that means. So it kind of reminds me of the music easel from Buchla, which I've never actually played, but I watched a few videos on it. And it too has that similar vibe where it's almost this like deceptively childish, playful machine, but then it's like this really powerful beast hiding underneath that you can unleash just by playing with it. And what's cool about that general category or vibe of synthesizers is that it kind of removes the fear from it, and it removes the like overwhelmingness you feel when you're in front of like a really complicated modular or something. So it kind of entices you to have fun and experiment. And I really found myself doing that with the Grandmother here. Every time I sit in front of it, I don't know if it's the general color scheme or the lack of menus or something about it, really makes me want to explore and like twist knobs and just have fun and not worry about, oh, am I getting this perfectly right? How am I tuning this oscillator? You're just kind of going crazy. But it also has all the tools you would want from a professional synthesizer as well. So I never found myself lacking. Like, it doesn't feel like a toy or that they took shortcuts that, oh, now you have to upgrade to a bigger synth to get the full features. Like, you have all that here, but it's kind of hidden behind this like friendly, deceptive mask. So yeah, it's super cool. That general category of synths you don't find too often. I can't actually name that many synths that have that. Usually the professional synths are very like professional looking, and the toy synths really look like toys and have flashy lights and kind of aren't appealing to anyone. So this is a really good blend of, it's a professional synth with like a toyish cover over it. I'm not trying to downplay it by saying it's a toy. It's just the general vibe. It has this playful kind of inviting character to it. So yeah, I really love that. And that's very intangible and hard to describe. And if you're going to read the spec sheet, you're not going to get that from that. You're not probably going to get that by watching videos. Like, really, you just have to try it out and play it, and you'll see what I mean. Hopefully, it's very inviting. I guess the best word to describe it. It also reminds me of those child laboratory sets where you would get like beakers and stuff and experiment. So again, it's kind of adult tools for children so that children have a mind that isn't filtered, or they're not self-judging themselves. They're just openly exploring and creating. And this reminds me a lot of that. It's almost kind of having this little laboratory, especially because everything is patchable here. So you're free to express yourself and explore all you want. And it has a really gradual learning curve. So if you're new to synthesizers, this would be super convenient too, because you can ignore all the patch points and make basic patches off the gate. And then later, as you progress and you start to learn more about synthesis, you can start expanding that with modulars and stuff. It honestly feels like the perfect synthesizer. And I don't say this lightly, and I haven't said that of a synth in a long time. And I know I sound like a fanboy, and I promise you Moog didn't pay me. I bought the synth with my own money. There's just something about it that just makes me happy and excited. And it makes me happy about the synth industry in general, that we still have market and room for these kind of creative, fun, unique synthesizers. I also love the fact that there are no menus. And this is sort of a controversial thing. Some people like a little more flexibility and controls and kind of screens to be able to see what's going on. I personally love the knob per function. And if you're not familiar with that, it just means that every function has one dedicated knob, so you're not sharing things and switching back and forth, which is really a powerful tool both for learning synthesis but also for exploring. There's something to be said about just the ability to explore and have fun and be surprised by certain sounds. So it's definitely helpful to have a solid understanding of synthesis as your starting point, but it's also helpful, in my opinion, to kind of remove that like filter and bring back your child mind and kind of just explore things freely and for fun. And that's much harder to do if you have to dial in through menus, because usually menus involve intention. You have to know exactly what you're looking for. Whereas here you can just, oh, let me see what happens if I patch this into that, and just have fun like that. And that leads to kind of creative juices flowing, and it allows you to maybe discover some things that you would not have normally thought of, and that's how you kind of learn and progress. At the end of the day, you can compare specs and all that, but this synth just makes me happy, and it makes me excited about synthesizers again. It kind of makes me feel the way I did when I first played a synthesizer. And to me, that's priceless. That feeling of excitement and inspiration is worth a lot more than a list of features, in my opinion. All right, so this is the part of the review where I'm supposed to say something negative or some constructive criticism on it so that we can keep this review balanced. But honestly, I'm trying to be super open and transparent here, and I'm actually struggling to find something I would find a flaw. All the things that are flaws about it are just feature requests that I would like to see, but I can't fault the synth for something it doesn't have, if that makes any sense. If I had to micro nitpick something, it would be that sometimes when I try to change octaves by holding the two buttons, I find that it locks in the feature of the button, if that makes sense. For example, when I go octave down, sometimes it would trigger playing the sequencer here, but I'm pretty sure that could get updated in the firmware, or maybe I'm just doing something wrong. But again, this is like me really digging to try to find something slightly negative to say about it. Yeah, so far, I don't know, maybe I'm just in the honeymoon phase, so I'm super gaga over this thing, but maybe in a few months, I'll do another kind of recap review once I've kind of settled down. All right, just going to end this review by stating what I think would be a next nice synthesizer for Moog to make. So Moog, if you're listening, please make this synthesizer. So yeah, it would be cool if there was a 4-voice polyphonic version of this, and you could call it Great Grandmother or Grandfather. Feel free to take that name. And it'd be cool if it had a 49 key keyboard with aftertouch. Same exact front panel, just 4 voices, slightly bigger keyboard with aftertouch. That would be a dream synth. And people have been wanting a polyphonic synth from Moog for a long time. So I'm sure it would sell like crazy. And I will definitely promote the bleep out of it. So if you make that synth, let me know. All right, so that wraps it up for the grandmother here. I know I sound like a huge fanboy. I promise you I'm not. This is really an honest opinion of the synth here. Really, I can't fault it for anything. So if you're looking for a kind of analog mono synth to have fun with, to learn, or just to make professional tracks with, or to interface with your rack, I mean, really, you can't go wrong. Like I can't. I'm trying to think of something. I can't. It's perfect. It's a perfect synth. All right. Hopefully this was interesting and useful, even though it was just all positive. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next.